The subject of our talk this morning is the Gita as a spiritual guide. The Gita is more a compendium of spiritual instructions than a book on philosophy. Scriptures embody the spiritual realizations of saints. Afterwards come philosophy or theology. Books on philosophy are written on those scriptures. On the Bhagavad Gita, many books have been written to support one or other system of philosophy. In India, anyone from ancient time, anyone who wanted to establish some philosophy wrote on the Gita. Shankaracharya wrote, Ramanujacharya, and many persons, many saints wrote to establish a certain system of philosophy. But the importance of the Gita lies more on the spiritual instructions that we find in this book. Therefore, many persons, though not interested so much in philosophy, find spiritual sustenance from the book. The book, the Gita, has 700 verses and 18 chapters. Each chapter is called a yoga. Yoga means really union with God, or that method by which we strive to find out our union with God. So each chapter is called a yoga. And of this, but it is more than that. There are 700 verses. In the first chapter, there are some names, a little description about the background of the Gita. Leaving these verses, almost each verse gives some directions about spiritual life. And even if you do not care for philosophy, if you take these verses according to our temperament, according to our present problems, from any verse we can find spiritual sustenance, and if we can follow up, we can reach even the highest goal of spiritual life. That is why the Gita is so important. And every year we find a large number of books written on the Gita or translations of the Gita. Even in translations, particular person try to show in what way he got benefit from the Gita. He feels he has found so much benefit out of it. He wants to share his experiences with others. In the present century, we find some outstanding books written on the Gita, not so much to establish a particular system of philosophy, but just to show how one got benefit out of the Gita. in the early part of this century, a good translation and a good book on the Gita was written by a person who was put into jail by the government because of his political activities. For 7 years, I think that is the figure, he was put in a jail in a Burma. He had no books with him, no reference books, but he was a stupendous scholar, Bal Gangadhar Tilak. And simply out of memory, he wrote a book on the Gita just to show the Gita emphasizes work. He was a man of activities, political activities, and he showed how the Gita emphasizes an active life. In the same way, Mahatma Gandhi found out the support of his theory or creed of non-violence from the Gita. And out of his teachings, a book has been written on the Gita. I think the latest book, very popular book on the Gita has come out of the lectures delivered by Vinoba Bhave. Perhaps some of you have heard his name, and he got a large area of land, appealing to the rich persons in behalf of the poor people. And his talks on the Gita have become so popular, and it has been translated already in several languages. See, they found so much sustenance from the Gita, and those they wrote. And the Gita does not confine itself to a particular system of philosophy. It is called eternal religion, or what in the West you will say perennial philosophy. It appeals to the understanding of common man, and it supplies sustenance, spiritual sustenance, to all people, irrespective of any differentiation. And therefore, many persons not belonging particular to Hinduism are also interested in the Gita, because it appeals to the common understanding and it solves the common problems of men in general. It has such a wide appeal. The Gita and the Upanishads and Vedanta, a book on Vedanta aphorisms, constitute really the Vedanta philosophy. But whereas Upanishads speak of so high things, that the Upanishadic teachings are more than what can appeal to the common people. Even if many appreciate the intellectual approach to the highest point of our spiritual life, many find it difficult to follow in practice. And so came the Gita. The Gita is a popular book giving the substance and the essence of the Upanishads or Vedanta. The Gita comes down to the level of the common man in the street, as it were. It comes down right to the problem of a common ordinary man. And from that state, the Gita raises one higher and higher. The background of the Gita, strangely enough, was a battlefield. Arjuna, in modern terms, a military general, came to the battlefield. Two armies were in array, and just at the time one had to strike, Arjuna was seized with confusion. His courage gave way, his nerves failed. And as it happens in ordinary life, when we find we are unable to cope with the situation, we begin to talk high metaphysics or high philosophy. Arjuna began to talk high philosophy and said that it was not right to take part in such a battle, which meant bloodshed. And he was passing through such a great mental strain, not being able to decide what was right and what was wrong. He said to his charioteer, driver, who was his friend, Sri Krishna. He knew Sri Krishna as his friend. But Sri Krishna was also a divine power come on the earth as a divine incarnation, or as the Christians will say, God the Son. But to Arjuna, he was simply his friend. But it does not matter in what relationship we look at a God-man or a divine power. And Arjuna was so much conscience-stricken to see what is coming ahead. He began to, in a very desperate condition of mind, he asked his friend what to do. He said, I am conscience-stricken. I've lost all faith in my judgment. I'm in confusion. I do not know what is right and what is wrong. Please give me help. Just as a teacher gives help to a student. Just think, he was in such a state of agony that to his friend he says, just like a teacher you teach me, I cannot decide what is right or what is wrong. I'm in confusion. His problem was common, daily problem, as it were. In our daily life, we are faced with problems. We are in confusion. If we want to live a conscientious life, then the problem becomes much more severe. We do not know what to do. We might be seeing the ideal, but its practical application becomes different. So that is exactly was the point of Arjuna. He did not speak to Krishna. Let me know how one can realize God. What is the purpose of life? He did not indulge in metaphysical problems. It was not a spiritual problem with him. He said, just now I do not know what is right or what is wrong. And as such, it was the problem of a common man. It was the problem 3,000 years back, and this is the problem now. If we have a little sensitive conscience, we are seized with doubts. We do not know what is right and what is wrong. And there comes a conflict. Sometimes conflict becomes severe. The conflict was severe with Arjuna. From one standpoint, it is good that there comes such severe conflict in our lives. Conflict born of conscience. the result of conscientious living or the result of a desire to live a conscientious life. It is exactly that moment when our lives take different directions. It becomes hard to face such problems. But exactly these are the situations in which we grow in our spiritual life, or in which we get a glimpse of spiritual life. Even if you are an ordinary common man, not interested in religion, but out of these situations, out of these conflicts, out of this severe churning, as it were, we see a different glimpse. And the purpose of our life becomes different then. It is said man's extremity is God's opportunity. Everyone has to pass through these states willy-nilly, however hard the situation. If we want really spiritual life, we have to pass through these stages. I said Mahatma Gandhi found in the Gita support for his creed or theory of non-violence, he said. His life was in politics, he said once. He wrote, I have found myself in many situations. I did not know what to do. I turned to the Gita. Invariably I found a guidance. Invariably I found a gleam of light, and I would smile. He got the guidance. He got a light when everything seemed to him dark. So that is the Gita. And what was the reply given by his friend or teacher? He said, he starts. First thing he said, don't yield to unmanliness. First important statement or instruction he gave. There will be problems in life, discouraging, when you are thrown in despair. But we have to face with strength and courage. We have to make a deliberate attempt to call up courage from within us, even things seem to be dark. And it is strange, when we face half the problem is over. It is said all our miseries are through fear, and all our happiness is through imagination. But in actual things, things do not come as we fear or as we hope. So the first important thing in life is to face these situations, however difficult it may be. The first thing Krishna said to his friend, don't yield to unmanliness. Then he said, why are you afraid? Why do you fear? You talk of what is right and what is wrong, but think first what you are. You are the eternal self. You are ever pure. You are immortal. You are not a bundle of flesh and nerves. You are not a mortal being. That is your real nature. Think of that and get courage. You are ever pure. You are all-knowing. Real self within you is all-knowing. And thinking of that, try to get courage. Swami Vivekananda would say, if people only emphasize that idea, what they really are, many problems of life would have been solved. But we do not think that way. So Krishna says, summon up courage. If you cannot by yourself think of that idea, what you really are, you are never born, you will never die. You are the self, eternal. You have eternal existence. Think of your real nature. Then the problem will be solved more easily. But it gives direction too. Because you think you are a mortal body, you are afraid or you are in grief. And you do not like to face the duties of your life. There has been a discussion, a great deal of discussion, whether Gita supports or encourages warfare. But here the question is, when Krishna says, it is not in terms of warfare or bloodshed, it is in terms of higher thing. It is in terms of doing one's duties and how to do that, so that we can get the best benefit. We can solve the problem of our life. So Krishna says, don't think in terms of happiness or unhappiness. Don't think in terms of gain and loss, victory or defeat, success or failure. You are much greater than that. Intrinsically, you are much greater than that. You are the self. So don't think in terms of, you become panicky because you think in terms of happiness and unhappiness, victory or defeat. That is not the question. Important thing, you will have to do your duties. And if you always remember that you are the eternal self, you will find the senses will do. You have the tendency to work. But you yourself separate from the body idea. You think that you are the self. And when you think in terms of the self, you will never be obsessed by the thoughts of happiness and unhappiness. You are much greater than ordinary happiness and unhappiness. But for an ordinary person, it becomes very difficult to feel that he is the eternal self. It is too much for ordinary person. As if Krishna saw that, and he said, all right, this has been told according to the philosophy of self-knowledge. But I say the same thing in a different way, according to the problem of a common man, as a yoga of practical wisdom. And this method is so valuable. Even if we do not succeed completely from the worldly standpoint, you will never be loser. If you make only an attempt, you will be free from great amount of fear. From that standpoint, nothing will be lost. Even a little attempt in this respect will give you safety against great fear. Don't think in terms of successes and failure. Trouble and suffering arises in life because we are so much obsessed by the thought of success or failure. But neither success nor failure completely is in our hands. We can only work, but we can never be sure of result. However, we desperately think in terms of result, we long to get the result, to become the first person in the whole world. But things do not come according to our wish. There are other factors in life of which we are not aware. So we can never say that the result will come according to our liking, according to our desire. You have the right to the actions. You can act, but you have no right to the result of that action. So don't think in terms of the result of actions, but at the same time, don't succumb to inertia. Don't succumb to inactivity. Don't try to escape from hard works. Don't try to fly away because the works seem to be difficult. It's a very thin line of demarcation. You cannot think of the results, but you have to work very, very hard, as if your whole life is bent upon the success of that work. Only persons who are small-minded think in terms of petty success or failure, therefore they suffer. But bold persons do not care for these results. This success or failure is something like a toy in the hand of a child. A child is happy if the toy is in its hand, and if the toy is taken away, it begins to cry. In the same way, human beings think that their life is simply a succession of tears and laughter and tears. And therefore they become object of pity. Whole life is in suspense. Whole life is a succession of fears and hopes. But if you can give up the idea of success or failure, and at the same time work, you will get really peace. You will get really joy, which is beyond the reach of ordinary persons. The instruction is so practical. It seems to be theoretical, but when you begin to work, we find the result comes at once. We feel peace because we do not care for these things. Whatever comes, we accept. Because we do not like to accept whatever comes, even if we do not believe in God, circumstances play a great part as to whether we would succeed in our work or fail. But if we accept any situations and at the same time work very hard, there will be great peace. At once we shall get peace. This also, to a certain extent, too much a philosophical idea. Not possible for ordinary persons. Not to think in terms of personal glory or personal discomfiture. If one tries, one gets some result, but one cannot go on long. Ordinary persons. But as I said, Gita deals with the ordinary problems of ordinary persons. Therefore, Gita is so important. Therefore, Gita is such a great guide. And it is strange, even Shankaracharya, dealing with these verses, he invariably says, don't think in terms of success or failure. Think in terms of worship of God. Consider that these works are opportunities for you to worship God. Think in terms of the glory of God. Think in terms of worshiping God through your actions. As Saint Paul, I think, said, work as for the glory of God, not for your personal advantages or disadvantages. So in all these verses, Shankaracharya, a monist, he invariably says, work for the worship of God. Work as a form of worship to God. You see, at once, the tension becomes less. Thinking always, try to think in terms of trying to think not in terms of success or failure. We find it difficult to go on with our work. Either we fall into inertia or we are too much caught in the work. But the real solution is for ordinary persons, if one works as a form of worship to God. At once the works take a different color. I have nothing to do with the success, so long I do the work according to my best understanding and according to my best ability. That is enough. It's a form of worship. I'm interested in doing my worship in the best manner. Everyone wants to do the worship, if one has any religious tendency, in the best way possible. So one can do this way, he says. Simply take it as a form of worship, not in terms of the result. By the way, the best result will come out of it, because if you work in that spirit as a form of worship, you will be calm always, restful, not worried, and the best in you will come out. Much of our energy is lost in conflict, in the fear of uncertainty. Much of our energy is wasted. But if you can do the works as a form of worship, at once we get back many of the energies which are going to be lost. And as I said, the Gita takes a common man step by step to higher stages of spiritual life. And if you think in terms of worship of God, what is the nature of God? We do not see God. Many will say that God is formless, some ideas, God is all-pervading, and so on. In what will be our attitude towards God? That will be the next problem. Yes, those who think that God is all-pervading, and those who think they will always try to impress upon their minds that idea, God is all-pervading. But as a corollary, many things come in. You cannot think in terms of likes and dislikes. One cannot be your friend, another cannot be your enemy. But in life, always, we have likes and dislikes. And if you think, if you have to feel that God is all-pervading, out of human frailties and weakness, you do many things. And how can you find a remedy for that? Those persons who are spiritually strong, only they can follow that idea, that God is all-pervading. Let us think on that idea. God is impersonal. Let us think on that idea. But we think on that idea, but we cannot follow those ideas into practice. So the Gita says, yes, this is an idea, but for a person, ordinary person, who live on the idea of his body consciousness, cannot follow that high ideal. Therefore, think of God as creator, as a personal relation, as a father or mother and so on, some relationship. Establish some relationship. God is a personal being. God is both personal and impersonal, but if you think in a way that God is a personal relation with you, then it will be easier. But we do not live in compartments, watertight compartments, path of devotion or path of work. And the Gita combines it. And he says, dedicate all your works to God. And with intense devotion, you think of me. Think of me as your only support and help. Do not depend on anything, anyone else. Do not depend on any man or any circumstance. Depend on me only. In times of troubles, think that I'm the only person who can give you help and who is your unfailing support. Dedicate all your works to me and consider me to be the only support, real support to you in life. If you can do that, this is a combination of work and devotion. In no time, you will get peace. At once, you will get peace if you can combine these two things. Don't depend on any man or any situation. This and that circumstance. Circumstances will be always changing. Man might be powerful, but man is after all frail. He cannot give you always help. So you stand on quicksands, but consider me to be your only support. No one else can give you support. And if you can do that, the very emphatically says, in no time, at once, you will get the result. These are the verses which give strength to persons who look to the Gita as a spiritual guide. In another verse, the similar thing is said. But one thing is common. At once you will get the result. There they said, I am within the heart of all beings. I am the person who supplied power and energy to the activities of human beings. And just rely on me sincerely and earnestly, with perfect sincerity. Rely on me. Then at once you will get peace. These things are so strongly said. But we find it very difficult to follow. But those persons who follow take these things literally. If the Gita should be a spiritual guide, we should take these things literally and try to put into practice. Those who do that then get greater and greater sustenance and results. And their faith in the scripture grows stronger and stronger. Another problem, we might think in terms of God as a personal being, but what about our mind? Mind betrays us at any moment. At one moment, we feel we are so religious. Our devotion to God is so great. And the next moment, we feel there is no God. If there is God, why has He put us in such difficult situations? Where is God? We do not get any help from Him. Everything dries up, as it were. Everything slips away through our fingers, as it were. The mind gives us trouble. We are not sure of what mind will dictate to us and how to control the mind. The Gita says the mind can be controlled only through spiritual practices, through meditation. And there are directions about meditations. But the problem is, we may get directions about meditation, but the moment we try to meditate, we find mind is such a terrible thing. Mind wanders. It will not come to the point where we want to direct our mind. And Arjuna says very pathetically, yes, what you speak of the methods of meditation are true, but I find it is so difficult to control. It is so difficult to control the mind. It is something, it is as difficult as to control the blowing wind. I find it is impossible. Mind is so restless. And we eagerly long for the answer which Krishna would give. And he said, undoubtedly, mind is terrible. Krishna says, undoubtedly, mind is terrible, hard to control. But the only method is one should practice. Through practice only, it will become easier and easier. And along with practice, you should be always discriminating what is right and what is wrong. If you constantly be discriminating, then your mind will not go after things which are transitory, which are not eternal. That will be one help, and the greatest help will be to strive ceaselessly in spite of failures. To practice only, you can get strength, you can strengthen the muscles of your mind. These are the only two remedies. There is no other remedy. In this way, Krishna answers many problems of the life of Arjuna. And those problems are common to our life. We are in different situations. Mind passes through different stages. But in the Gita, invariably we find some help. If we take to this book, not for intellectual study, but as a guide to our life. And step by step, Arjuna is raised. And towards the end, there comes the climax. Krishna says, I shall tell you a great secret. Rather, the greatest secret I shall tell you, because you are so dear to me. Try to direct all your thoughts to me. Make me the supreme goal of your life. And try to think of me, not about success or failure, or giving up all considerations as to what is right or what is wrong. Depend on me. Depend on me and me alone. I shall save you from all pitfalls. It is found in actual practice. So long as we depend on our efforts, on ourselves, we do not completely succeed. But when we can depend on God, the help comes. But here, Krishna says, I shall tell you this greatest secret. Depend on me alone, and I shall save you from all pitfalls. And the next verse is, Krishna says, this is a secret. It should not be told. It never, the word is never, kadachana. This should never be told to one who has not tried his best in spiritual exercises, who has not developed great faith, and who is not ready to hear. This should not be told to one and all. It should not be told to one who has not developed sufficient faith and who is not ready to hear, ready to listen. In ordinary life, we depend on ourselves, all on our ego. And therefore, we are not in a mood to hear any spiritual instruction. We cannot believe that the result will come by depending on God. It becomes impossible. As a practical proposition, it becomes impossible so long as there is the ego in us. And what is this ego? It is said it is something like a soap bubble. A breath of wind will destroy it and show its hollowness. But still, we are so much dependent on ego, or our faith in ego is so strong that we cannot think that we can depend on any power outside of ourselves. Though we do not know what this ego is, it is something like headache without a head, something like a tub without its bottom. We do not know what this ego is, a mysterious existence. But all along, we depend on ego. We think we shall be able to do it. In the personal lives, we find so many times that we suffer because of that. The history indicates what is the result of depending on ego. Hitler was the greatest example of what a life can be wholly dependent on ego. He shook the world to its foundations, as it were. He depended on his ego. His ego became so great. But do you remember what the result was? During his last days, I do not know whether years or months, he'll be always getting injections to stimulate him. He became victim of so much mental depression. Constantly would be giving injection, and he committed suicide. The result of what happens when we depend completely on ego. And we cannot depend on God unless we have tried our very best. So if we think of spiritual life, we shall not be able to surrender to God completely unless and until we have known from our personal experiences that by our efforts, even in spiritual life, we cannot go far. Our spiritual efforts, however great and noble, are not enough if we try only by ourselves. So he says, but when we have tried our very best, when we come to the limit of our powers, then we long for power which is not human, a power which is outside of ourselves. Then we shall know how dependence on God, reliance on God, gives us great strength, gives us great peace, gives us great relief. So it is said, this thing should never be told to one who has not tried his best, who is not ready to listen. He cannot give religion in advance. Those who are not ready to listen, it is those in whom religious problems are not problems at all, in whom religious consciousness has not awakened. No use telling them. Let them have experiences. Not necessarily they're wrong. in life we want to have experiences. Even hard experiences are good in the long run. Our trials, our errors, our mistakes, our blunders have that utility. Because by that we learn. When we learn through our mistakes and blunders, and when we long for something else, then we shall listen. Then we shall be ready to hear. And so he said that these things should not be told to anyone who has not tried his best, who is not ready to listen, who has not developed sufficient faith. But he does not reject them. There will come a time when they also will come to that state. From their experiences we will know our efforts by themselves are not enough. When you can fully rely on God, help comes, peace comes, because we do not surrender completely. Half surrender is a death trial. Full surrender is a complete peace. That is the trouble. We cannot surrender fully because our ego has not gone as yet. Through our efforts and through our failures, through our frustrations, we shall know what the value of ego is, how unreliable or just transitory, unreliable or nebulous this ego is. So and when you completely depend on God, then the result will come. And this is told as the climax and the last message. And the last words are to Arjuna. Krishna says, have you listened what I have said? Have you understood clearly what I have said? And Arjuna says, yes, now I have understood. I see my path. My doubts have gone. I shall do what you have asked me to do. It is said, Krishna solved the problems of Arjuna and his doubts vanished. But Arjuna was simply a representative man. Through Arjuna, Krishna appealed to all humanity for all times. And therefore, even 2 or 3,000 years after the time when these conversations took place, we find result, we find guidance. If we look for guidance, we find. And if the doubts of Arjuna had been dispelled by the words of Krishna, the same opportunities for all of us. If Arjuna was free from doubt, there will come a time when we all shall be free from doubts.